Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's exciting MetalCon Live. I'm Kaylin, the Trade Show and Event Specialist for MetalCon, and joining us for today's presentation is Trent Cotney of Cotney Law, who will be talking about legal updates in the post-COVID-19 world. Today's session is brought in partnership with the MCA. Check out this slide on my screen now to learn more about the benefits of MCA membership. If you want to learn more about membership beyond what this slide says, you can reach out to Jeff Irwin. His information is listed at the bottom of the screen. It's no secret that safety is a catalyst on the job site, and ensuring your crews are as safe as possible can be a daunting task. MetalCon has developed the program called Metal Focus Safety to help with this. We offer this program online now or as a two-part workshop in person at MetalCon this October. We're also pleased to be launching the Architect's Experience at MetalCon this year, offering top education, access to the latest metal construction products, and the opportunity to hear renowned architect Jan Weymouth speak at the Dali Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida. Be sure not to miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime experience. It is official. MetalCon will be in person this October 6th through the 8th in Tampa, Florida, with brand new experiences, extensive education, and opportunities for everyone in the metal construction industry to enjoy. And of course, everyone's favorite is coming back, Oktoberfest. Another returning favorite this year is going to be Trent Cotney. He'll be presenting 2 courses on Wednesday, October 6th. If you like this course that you're witnessing today, be sure to check back for those 2 as well. Lastly, MetalCon will be taking a summer holiday, but we will be returning on July 28th, 2021. So mark calendars and join us for MetalCon Live presents Condensation, the Why and How to Avoid It, being presented by Todd Miller of AIA Industries. If you run into any technical issues today, please send me a request in the chat box and I will be happy to help. Again, just reach out to Kaylin Burke in the chat box and I can help you with any technical issues. Last thing is AIA credit will be applied for this course. So if you do want that AIA credit, just be sure that you submit the survey at the end of this course. And if you want that certificate, not just the AIA credits, fill in that survey as well. So with all that being said, I'm going to hand this right back over to Trent. Trent, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Kaylin. I appreciate that. And obviously, I'm really excited about having MetalCon this year in my backyard, which is great. We've got offices all over the U.S. and Canada, but Tampa is our headquarters. That's where I'm located, and always love having MetalCon here in Florida. So we'll have, in addition to speaking, we'll have a booth. Really looking forward to being able to see everybody there in person. Very excited about that. So today the topic is legal updates in a post-COVID world, and we're still in COVID. We're still dealing with some issues, and who knows what this Delta variant looks like or other variants that may happen down the way. But what I want to do today is I want to talk to you about some HR related things. I want to talk to you about OSHA and some vaccines, but the biggest thing that's affecting construction right now is material shortages and material price increases. So what I'm going to do is spend a lot of time discussing that. I would say probably 75% of my day is comprised of dealing with these issues, either increased lead times, delays, liquidated damages claims, or increased prices as a result of a variety of different factors. So we're going to talk about all that. Let's get right into it. Now, if you got questions, feel free to ask. You can ask at any time. I'll try to monitor it as well. Return to work policies. You know, one of the things that was really interesting about last year is that many of your home office or, non-labor personnel could work from home. And we've got a situation where we are now kind of transitioning away from that work from home into either back to work or sort of a hybrid policy. And that's created a variety of HR related issues and in turn some legal issues. So some of the things that's interesting is when you are able to return to work, and those of you that are listening to this may be in different parts of the country. Here in Florida, we've been wide open for a while now, but other states are still sort of progressing and moving into that position. So when you are able to fully return to work, you want to be able to put people in a similar position as to what they were doing away from work, okay? The one thing that I want you guys to kind of keep in mind is anytime you're dealing with employees, you get into trouble when there's disparate treatment. Okay, when you're treating one employee different than another, that's when the bad guy lawyers start knocking on your door. Okay, so you want to watch out for that. Some other things that you might want to be thinking about is fit for duty. You know, if you've had people that have been away from the office, they're returning to the office. Let's say it's part of your metal shop, or it's part of your warehouse staff, whatever it might be. You want to make sure that you engage in fit for duty just to make sure that they're capable of still performing the same task. Now, one of the things I often recommend from an employment standpoint is spend some time up front before you hire somebody and create a very robust and definitive job description. Okay, and this sounds obvious, and you're probably saying to yourself, Trent, I get this, but why are you talking about? Here's why. Okay, what I like to do in job descriptions is I like to put everything that I expect this person to do. So, you know, must lift 25, be able to lift 25 pounds, operate a forklift, whatever the requirements are. But if you are very specific about what they have to do, not just, you know, I need a foreman, I need a crew person, whatever it might be. Then what happens is in situations like this, where you do have a return to work kind of environment, you can look back at that job description and say, okay, can you do X? Can you operate a forklift? Can you do this? Can you do that? Is there anything preventing you from doing that? And that's not only in return to work situations such as this, it can be for, you know, traditional return to work, okay, or fit for duty analysis. One of the things that I really want to hit home is if you are engaging in a return to work policy, you want to make sure that it's in writing and disseminated to all of your employees, okay? You want everybody to understand what the process is. So I'll tell you about what we did internally. We've got, you know, roughly 100 and change employees across all offices, and different offices had different requirements, right? But one of the things that we consistently did was make sure to enact a lot of safety here in our offices. We've got, you know, sanitizer stations. We social distance, you know, we've got closed door offices, which makes things easy. There's a lot of other things that we did from an educational standpoint. And you can do the same thing through toolbox talks. But the key thing is to make sure everybody is on the same page. Okay. Make sure they understand what they can do and what they can't do. And the policies that you want to implement, they want to be consistent with obviously CDC guidelines, which OSHA has now kind of punted to and said, okay, we're not going to put out an emergency temporary standard with regard to COVID-19, but what we are going to do is we're going to say, look, you know, here are some guidance that you can follow, okay? Those policies that you enact, they have to be consistent with whatever the federal government is saying, but also with whatever your state or local requirements are. So oftentimes, for example, Pacific Northwest, some other places, I've seen a lot more restrictive policies than what the federal government is even saying. So you want to make sure that whatever your local requirements are, you're reflecting that in your written documentation. For those of you that have seen me speak before, you know there's one thing I consistently say: the party with the best paper wins the day in any construction dispute or anything relating to construction. So this is one of those great examples where if you have stuff in writing, you show what your policy is, you can point to that policy in the event that you have an employee that's not compliant. Now, let's get to vaccines. Vaccines is a big topic right now. I can tell you that I get a lot of calls from contractors and those in the industry asking about whether or not they can mandate vaccines. Okay, simple answer is yeah. The CDC even put out guidance to that effect recently. I gave you the link there. But there are some concerns that you should have. Okay, the first is if someone refuses to get the vaccine on the basis of religious reasons. There are some religions that don't allow for vaccines. Then you could potentially be looking at a Title VII issue. Okay, and what that means is you need to avoid discrimination. Okay, and I'll tell you what that means and how to deal with it. Okay, the next is medical grounds. You may have certain people that may be allergic or unable to receive a vaccine. That potentially implicates the ADA. This is not a HIPAA issue. Oftentimes, I have contractors or people in the industry say, oh, it's a HIPAA violation. Well, unless you're a healthcare worker or you work in the healthcare industry, it's not HIPAA, it's ADA, okay? Common misconception. So what happens if you end up in a situation where you have a Title VII or an ADA issue? You've got to go through the analysis to provide a reasonable accommodation. What does that mean? Okay, well, I've got a legal assistant that had some back issues, came back to work. We had to get a special chair in order to accommodate her. And that's fine. You know, I get anything and everything people want to work. Trust me, whatever you want, I'm going to get it for you. So it's the same kind of thing. You got to go through the accommodation analysis and see, is this something that you can accommodate? Okay. So can you ask someone what the reason is for their denial? Okay. You got to be real careful about this. Okay. You don't want to get too much into it. Now, can you ask, one of the questions that I get often is, can you ask if someone has received a vaccine? Absolutely. There's nothing preventing you under the ADA or any other law that's out there that says that you can't ask if someone has been vaccinated. What you need to be careful about is going underneath that and saying, okay, what's wrong with you that prevents you from not getting a vaccine? Okay. If they say, look, I can't get a vaccine for medical reasons, that's pretty much all that you need. And then you need to understand, okay, I've got to try to accommodate, then you go through the normal analysis there. You can't physically force somebody to get a vaccine. You can't, handcuff them and lead them to a vaccination point. You can't do that. But there are certain requirements, and especially in right to work states, that you can say, look, if you're not vaccinated, you can't work here. And we had a certain situation recently. A great example was a federal Texas case just came out a couple of weeks ago, where about 150 workers challenged the healthcare industry, hospitals, and said, you can't mandate that we have vaccines. They suspended a bunch of them. The court in that case said, yeah, the hospital can absolutely do that. So everything that is out there, every case, every CDC guidance that's been posted says that you can do this. Now, if you are a union shop, okay, you need to watch out for your CBA and collective bargaining. Okay, you need to provide notice, opportunity to bargain, work with your union reps in order to figure out what the issues are there. Key thing is that you want to balance the need to mandate vaccines with employee concerns. Okay, that's always the key thing. So let me just talk a little bit about voluntary incentive programs. What we did here throughout all of our offices is we offered a voluntary incentive program. And what we said is, look, if you get vaccinated, we will give you either 4 hours paid time off or a $50 Amazon gift card. A lot of our employees are salaried, so 4 hours PTO doesn't really mean too much to them. But the gift cards definitely went over pretty well. I'm still waiting on mine. Yeah, just kidding. But so can you do voluntary incentive programs? Absolutely. My recommendation there is work with your third-party benefits provider. And the key thing is you don't want to create too large of an incentive, because you don't want a situation where you are creating a coercive type environment. Always avoid punishment. Okay. Don't make it a negative, always make it a positive. But it's good, because what we now know is who, that the majority of our workforce is now vaccinated. And it helps us kind of understand that and kind of keep watch on it. So definitely recommend that. I think it's useful. We've also had situations where we were contacted by a structural steel contractor that was required to have everyone that stepped on a certain project be vaccinated. So what we did with this individual is we created a policy and a program that allowed for that crew and some alternates to be vaccinated. He didn't want to mandate it throughout the entire company, but we did want to make sure that we had enough workforce to be able to perform that project. So I would expect that you're going to see more and more of that, especially in, nursing home situations or schools or other areas that might pose a risk of additional COVID spread. One of the other questions that I received a lot was, can your customers require your workers to be vaccinated? I just talked about it. Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing preventing that. But here's something that I want our listeners to pay attention to, and that is, if you have an existing contract already and that requirement is not in there, they cannot force you to get vaccinated unless there's some other local, state, or federal law that I have yet to hear of. Okay. But if this is something that you're bidding on now, let's say you are submitting a proposal or a contract or bidding, then yes, absolutely, it can be a requirement, and it is a requirement that you have to follow. Okay. That's the key thing. And I'm seeing more and more of this. So I think it's going to be a trend moving into the future. When vaccines first came out, there was a lot of tentativeness, especially on the part of mandating. I'm seeing more and more contractors require it and more customers require it. So as we move in, we're in summer now, as we start moving into late fall and winter, and some of the stats may spike, you can definitely anticipate there will be more of it. talk briefly about OSHA. We do a significant amount of OSHA defense. Just came out with our second book on OSHA defense here recently on Amazon. And one of the things that I was working with our national lobbyist on was whether or not there would be a COVID-19 emergency temporary standard. Now, let me take a step back and say I am the biggest believer in safety there is. I have an OSHA 10, a 30, the HAZWOPER, you name it. I've got all the training. Every penny you spend on safety is a penny well spent. But my concern here is I thought this was government overreaching. You know, the CDC had their arms around this. The guidance was constantly changing. And I didn't want an emergency temporary standard that could be used as a basis to cite, you know, contractors and others in the industry. So we moved to kind of fight against this. And it looks like at this point, we, you know, fingers crossed, don't want to jinx it, but as of right now, it looks like they did do an emergency temporary standard for the healthcare industry. But with regard to construction, they just created renewed guidance. Okay, so there's a lot of CDC guidance out there. Guidance can't be cited as a violation. Okay, there are other ways that they can get you for a violation of COVID-19, but guidance isn't one of them. So far, so good. Again, all for safety. I believe every precaution should always be taken, but I'm not a fan of regulation and more rules just for rules' sake. So that's where we are with OSHA. Now what I want to do, this is what you guys have been waiting for. And you're probably thinking to yourself, when is Trent going to talk about the material shortage and material price increase issue? I'm going to walk through everything that I have to deal with on a daily basis. So to give you an idea, over the last 6 weeks, we track everything that comes into this office. For the last 2 years, if it's a litigation claim, if it's an answer, if it's a defense, and I track a variety of things. We have a statistician that tracks manufacturer of the product, geographic region, type of claim, type of defense. And what I do is I use that data to help me predict the future and help be proactive in providing advice to our customers to help them hopefully not get sued or to help them to get them in a better position for purposes of mitigating whatever their problems are. So I can tell you over the last 6 weeks, we have had 193 separate contractors call us with either a material price increase problem or a material delay problem that was so significant that they were looking at some kind of lawsuit or legal action. So that just, let me say that again, 193 separate contractors, okay, contacted us just for that. So that gives you an idea of how systemic a problem this is. This was all over the US and Canada. Just today, right before I hopped on this webinar, I had one of our lawyers walk in and said, Trent, this is a U issue. It goes all the way to the top. What do we got here? Contractor is facing a $250,000 price increase on a project because of material price increases. And we have been working with the customer to try to bridge that gap and come up with a solution to get the contractor paid. But the surety has stepped up and said, we will not provide you bonding because that 250 exceeds your capacity. So that's a problem, okay? So we're working on that problem. I've got some ideas. We're talking to the customer about doing direct purchase. We're talking about rephasing the project. Where there's a will, there's a way. I'm confident we can work through it. But that just gives you an idea. This has caused a significant amount of creativity and ingenuity on behalf of the construction industry trying to figure out how to navigate these issues. So what I like to do, and what I'm going to do is give you both contract provisions that you can insert in your current contracts, but really the issue is what do you do when you've got an existing contract? That's the bigger problem, right? If you can't avoid this problem now, and future contract, shame on you, because it's been such a big issue. Everybody should be aware of it at this point. You should be thinking about how to avoid it. I'm going to give you those tips. With regard to existing contracts, I have negotiated every single variation of this that you can ever think of. And what I decided to do was I wanted to put an SOP together to deal with this issue, a standard operating procedure. And I found that by following these 4 steps, that I could maximize the outcome for the client. And I'm going to give them to you, okay? And it's important that you understand this because a lot of times we'll have, somebody saying, hey, the price of accessories on this project has increased dramatically. And they pick up the phone immediately to the customer and they say, hey, I need $25,000 more. That's not an effective negotiating technique. That is called falling on your sword. Okay. I don't like that. Okay. Maybe it's the lawyer in me. Maybe it's the hustler. I don't know. At the end of the day, that's not a good technique. What I always want to do is I want to come from a position of strength. If you come from a position of strength, you are going to set yourself up for success. So the first thing I want to do, and I'm going to go through each of these in more detail, okay, is I want to set the stage. I've got to be able to identify what the issue is to the customer. We're going to talk about how you can lean on distribution and manufacturers to assist you in this process. Okay, and this is one of those great situations where it does not pay to point the finger at each other. You want to be flying in formation. And I'll say it several times throughout this presentation: happy customer, happy contractor. Okay, happy contractor, happy distributor, happy manufacturer, so on and so forth. Okay, so it all starts with the customer. If the customer's happy, everybody else is happy. That needs to be the analysis. So that's the first step, set the stage. Second is identify the contract provisions that can help you. Okay, and what I mean by that is what I want you to do is I want you to go through your contract and identify any provision that will give you a colorable argument to make a claim. Okay, I'm going to give you some examples of that. We're going to talk about force majeure, which is fancy legal for act of God. We're going to talk about delay claims. Once you have identified all of those contract provisions, anything that can help you, then what I want you to do is I want you to submit a change order or a claim pursuant to your contract, okay? And some of you that may be on the line may be, from distribution or manufacturing. Clearly, this is a different analysis, but it's important for you to understand this analysis so that you can help your customers as well. So when you submit the change order, one of the biggest problems that I see from contractors in general is they do not advocate. Okay, all they do is push paper. When you are pushing paper via a change order or an RFI or a change directive, okay, that doesn't help you. You need to advocate. Okay, we spend a lot of our time ghostwriting change orders. And the idea behind it is you need to set the stage, right? You need to talk about here's what it is, unforeseeable event, hasn't been this way. We could never have foreseen that this was going to happen. As a result, we're unable to obtain materials for 20 weeks. Section 4.5 of the contract provides that I'm entitled to additional time in the event of an unforeseeable event. As a result, we are hereby requesting, X number of days, Okay, that is a lot better. And then attaching the supporting documents. That's a lot better than just saying, hey, can't get materials for 20 weeks, give me time. Okay, which is a lot of times what I see. The reason you want to advocate in a change order is that it gives you the best capability of preserving your claim and getting it converted into dollars, which is important. After you have submitted that change order, that claim, that's when you pick up the phone. That's when you pick up the phone and you say, hey, Mr. Customer, I just want to give you a heads up. I submitted a change order. I know this is a bad situation for you. It's as bad for me and everybody else out here. Let's put our heads together and figure out how we can solve this problem. Okay. And it may be that you guys split the difference, or maybe you say, hey, I'll add another year on my workmanship warranty. Okay. So at least you're getting some additional consideration for it. Or let me put a maintenance plan in there for you. I'll have my guys come out once a quarter, check everything, make sure everything's, great. And if not, we'll see if it's a warranty issue and fix it. Okay. There are a variety of things like that you can do to kind of sweeten the pot, but you don't want to start having those negotiations until you follow the process. Come from a position of strength. Okay. So let's get into this a little bit more. What are the issues? Everybody likes to blame COVID-19, and yes, that is a part of it, but there's really about 20 separate issues that have created this supply chain disruption. So what are they? Well, a lot of them stem from what is known as just-in-time inventory, meaning that forever, the old adage, inventory kills, has been followed by every manufacturer, distributor, and contractor. You don't want a lot of inventory on, in stock that can't be immediately converted into money because you're just burning through cash, right? So a lot of these manufacturers, from a component standpoint, they may be waiting on things like resin or, whatever it is, copper, whatever the core material is that you need to create, right? and you can't get it because it's hung up somewhere else, okay? There's a variety of shipping problems, okay? There's not enough ships to move the stuff to where it's got to go. The railroads are over capacity. Good luck finding a trucker, okay? Trucking shortage everywhere is at an all-time high, okay? You cannot find enough trucking to do what needs to be done. We had a variety of refinery shutdowns, which hurts a lot of the accessories market, right? We had some horrific storms last year, everything from the 5 hurricanes that I think hit Louisiana and that area to El Derecho storm that hit Iowa and Illinois, causing billions in damage. You know, and then obviously COVID-19. And with COVID-19, you had, you know, border shutdowns, you had plants that were shut down, you had even now over in India and Brazil and other places that are still getting hit, a lot of the source metals that are used to, you know, create some of this stuff originate from those countries, you know, and if you can't mine, if you can't get access to the stuff that's needed in order to create it, then you can't move forward. Semiconductors, okay? Semiconductors are a huge problem. A lot of the equipment that you use to form, you know, good luck finding a lot of new equipment because they're having problems keeping up with existing demand. And here's something that I want our listeners to understand. Everyone is competing for the same resources. So the same semiconductors that we need for, you know, equipment, the auto industry needs that. You know, the tech industry needs it. Same with resins or lumber, or all kinds of stuff. So we are competing on a global basis for resources, and it has created this huge systemic supply chain disruption. This is not a yellow flag issue. This is a crisis level event. If you are watching this right now and you're saying, what is Trent talking about? I have no problems getting anything. This is crazy, okay? Let me give you a real world story. We are members of the International Federation for Roofing Trades, and they're based out of Germany. We talked to them maybe a couple months ago, or maybe a month ago, and we said, hey, we're having all these problems in the United States getting materials. What are you guys seeing over there? We don't have anything over here. Everything's great. We can get anything we want when we want it. It's great. Okay, we just talked to them last week. They got the problem. Okay, they can't get materials, and now they're stuck in the same exact position that we're stuck in. Okay, Canada's experiencing the same thing. I was on with the Canadian Association up there talking to them. It is a systemic issue, and it is not going away. It will be here for the rest of this year. I anticipate it will be here through first quarter, maybe even second quarter. So you must be prepared. Okay, so that is setting, if that's not setting the stage, I don't know what is. Now, what do I like to do here? Okay, this technique has worked very good, and I'm giving you the tricks of the trade. Okay, I like to go directly to distribution and the manufacturers, and I like to say, hey, instead of pointing a finger at them, I like to say, hey, you need to help me. Okay, I am in a bad situation here. I need some help. Okay, what I need from you is I need you to put a letter together that says that this was, you know, the reason you can't get this material is that it's a force majeure, or that it's unforeseeable or unforeseen, or better yet, here's my contract provision. I need you to track this language in your letter that I can then take, attach to my change order, and move it upstream. You guys follow me? That's how you go about doing it. And I can tell you, distribution manufacturers, they've been willing to work with me, right? They don't want to see their end users hurt either. So a lot of times they're more than willing to put favorable language in a letter. I had an international manufacturer contact me, and they said, Trent, can you create a form letter for us that we can use for our contract? I said, can I? Yes, absolutely. Let me get on that for you because I know it's going to help, you know, the contractors. So you can point to industry references as well. There's a ton of great industry references that talk about this issue, and it's been on the national news. You know, Biden recently came out and did a task force on it. That should show you how much of an issue this is. Now, I don't have a lot of faith that a task force is going to fix this issue, but what it does say is they don't know how to fix it, so they appointed a task force. And more than likely, the task force doesn't know how to figure it out either, but that shows you that it's on the government's radar. So this is a huge, huge issue. This works, okay? So keep in mind that this may help. Next thing I want to talk to you about is, remember, so we talk about setting the stage. The second is reviewing your contract to figure out what you can use in there that may help you. So force majeure, and we'll talk about, I'm going to give you some sample provisions that you can use. We're going to talk a little bit about payment and pricing, change order and claims provisions that you need to watch out for. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to talk about delays. Now, always remember, happy customer, happy contractor. That's all you need to remember here. Okay, happy customer, happy contractor. So force majeure, okay, what is force majeure? Well, this was talked about a bunch during COVID-19. I don't care if you're a manufacturer, supplier, consultant, contractor, whoever you may be, we were all talking about this, right? This is a standard provision. Basically what it says is that if there is an unforeseeable event like a hurricane, a war, a strike, an earthquake, those kinds of things that are beyond the reasonable control of the contractor, then their performance should be excused, okay? Or they should be provided some kind of relief. It's impossible for them to perform. And this is a standard provision, okay? This is what the standard one looked like. Well, after COVID-19 came out, what I did is I developed this. This is the force majeure that includes pandemics. It includes local, state, and federal emergencies. And the other thing that I did was I added unavailability of material and equipment to this. So it may be possible based on your contract provision to include a very specific site to, material or equipment unavailability. And reviewing these from existing contracts, not ones that we've reviewed or drafted, I actually have found that language in a few. And when I find that, I say, praise the Lord, I've got something that I can use to my advantage. Okay, so that's one of the things that you want to look out for. If you don't have this in your contract, you definitely want to put something like this in there. Now, the other thing that I want to mention to you is pricing. When you're looking at pricing, you want to be very careful about getting quotes. Okay, so let's say you are, a sheet metal contractor or a structural steel contractor, and you get a quote for, the material that you need. Okay, a quote is a quote. Okay, an estimate is an estimate. If you read the fine print of your credit application, more than likely it says a quote is a quote. So what I am advising a lot of my clients to do is definitely try to pre-purchase materials to the extent that you can. Work on storage. Okay, if you can't store them in your yard, then what you want to do is figure out how do you store them on the job site. If you can't store them on the job site, one of the things I did recently was I negotiated warehouse space, and we split it with the customer. But the key is that the prices are so erratic, the availability is so erratic that if you don't secure the stuff, you might not be able to. Okay, we all know that the price of steel has gone up, right? Gone up significantly. So one of the things that you need to think about, though, is not just the steel itself, but the accessories. So plates, you may have other things that you need for the project, adhesives, sealants, all kinds of stuff, okay? You might not be able to get it, and that's a problem, right? So you really want to figure out, how do you address this with your customer? Can the customer do a direct purchase, okay? Can you just have them order it direct and take care of it? The longer you wait, the more likely it is that you're going to see some additional volatility. So along those lines, one of the things that you want to watch out for is don't get into a hoarding kind of situation where you're just hoarding materials and speculating that you're going to be able to use them. You don't want to burn through all your cash. What I'm saying is work with your existing customers that you've got signed contracts on and say, hey, what can we do in order to alleviate some of these issues? Why don't we figure out how to purchase the materials now rather than take the risk? Because this is the biggest issue. Now, pay attention to this too, because I think this is worthwhile. Everybody hates lawyers, right? Myself included. President, if I've got anybody from the office here, I love you guys. Everybody else I hate. The thing that you want to understand is this is a way where you can use legal to actually help sell your project. So what I like to do is I like to say, hey, Mr. Customer, here's the proposal. Okay, these prices are good today, but let me give you all this data that shows that these prices are erratic. If you don't sign this contract today, I can't guarantee what the price is going to be. But if you sign it today, I'll order these materials today and I'll get this locked in for you right now. Okay, it's a pressure technique, may work. Okay, that's the key thing. Use it to your advantage. Recognize, understand the lay of the land. Not everything is a negative, right? You can turn some of it into a positive. Here's a price acceleration provision. If you don't have this in your contract, you need it in your contract. If you got an existing contract as part of your negotiations for getting paid more, you want to consider adding something like this in there. So what it says is that if any material line item goes up by X%, I've got 5% in here, but we recently negotiated an existing contract. We did a amendment to it where we said if any material price goes up by 15%, then the customer will pay for it. Okay, so we eat up to 15. Once it hits 16, customer pays that. Okay, and that's somewhat fair. That's a way to kind of bridge the gap. But this is a great provision. I originally designed this provision in 2004 and 2005 during the 4 or 5 hurricanes that hit all at once, because you could not find anything. You couldn't find plywood, you couldn't find fasteners, you couldn't find shingles, you couldn't find anything. Okay, so what I wanted to do was make sure that I had this in the contract, because there's nothing worse than having to hold the bag for a price increase. Okay, so keep in mind, this is a great thing. Now there's the last sentence here. Last sentence, you can either include or not include. And what that says is if anything goes up by more than a certain percentage, I put 10% here, but you can say 20%, 30%, then you have the ability to terminate it for convenience. Okay, it's harsh provision. Can you get that signed off on upstream? Rarely. Maybe if you're doing work for a condo association and they're not checking, but otherwise you're going to have a tough time getting that done. So I did want to include it just so you had it. Okay, lead times. Managing lead times. That's been one of the biggest issues. You're promised materials in 2 weeks, then you get the phone call and it says, it's going to be 2 months. Okay, for those of you doing schoolwork or doing federal projects, they are not very forgiving when it comes to delays. So what you really want to do is you want to be able to figure out how do you address these issues with your customer. Now, obviously, you guys wouldn't be on this webinar, you wouldn't be listening to me talk if you didn't have good customer service, right? You wouldn't be in business. I always say that contracts are the trench that you fall back into when customer service fails, okay? But clearly, you're going to have to use a combination of both legal and customer service to navigate a lot of these problems. I'm going to give you a material unavailability provision. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. And then we'll talk about the process of submitting a change order for a time extension. One of the things that I've tried to work on with our contractors that call us is when they're faced with these really enormous lead times, on the consulting side, what I do is I get with our consultants and I say, okay, let's look at the critical path. Let's figure out, is there a way to accommodate this schedule? Can we work with the GC, the general contractor, to shift other portions of the work to potentially accommodate the schedule? Or can we shift portions of our own work to accommodate the lead time on this one section? Okay, it requires ingenuity, it requires creativity, but I can't think of a single situation that I haven't been able to figure out at least some way around some of these issues. So what I want to do here is help you think about that. Think about certain things that you can do. And then substitution of materials. So, a lot of times if you are spec'd a certain sheet metal system to install on a roof, for example, there may be another manufacturer that can easily produce the same thing for you, okay? Where do you want to be careful here? If you've got a substitution of materials provision in your contract, you want to follow it very carefully, but you want to get the approval upstream of the architect or the engineer and the owner, okay? You want to make sure that it will continue to meet whatever design specs you've got. So you don't want, to have this other replacement system not meet wind uplift requirements or whatever requirements are needed. And most importantly, you want to make sure that if you've got other products that are out there in the field, that every manufacturer is okay with what you are doing, because there's nothing worse than when you have an apples to oranges system. It's not apples to apples, okay? The manufacturer will say, you know what, I'm not going to honor this warranty for you anymore because you didn't use the right underlayment or you didn't use the right whatever, okay? So make sure that you get all the required approvals in writing before substituting, but we've had to do this. Okay, I'll give you a great example. We had a fairly large residential project where it was a tile roof and it was spec'd to be adhered with foam adhesive. We could not find foam adhesive. It did not exist. I called a lot of the manufacturers and the people that I knew direct, and I was getting 6 month plus lead times for this specific product. So ultimately we went back to the customer and said, can we mechanically fasten? They said, no, we don't like that aesthetically. That's not what we want. We want this clean look. I didn't get it, but I said, okay. So we went back and we said, we can't put this system in, but what we can do is we can get you a really clean looking metal roof. okay? And we can get that done for you in the time that you want, okay? And honestly, it didn't really cost that much more. Customer's happy, and what do I say? Customer's happy, contractor's happy. That's all that was required. We executed the change orders, we moved on, and now they're in the process of installing that system. So think outside the box. That's going to be the difference between you navigating this. Material availability provision. This is something that you really want to make sure that you've got in your contract. I kept this very short and sweet. There are larger provisions that are more robust, but the idea behind it is, hey, customer, I just want to let you know there's a lot of material shortages out there. I'm going to do my best to get it, but don't hurt me if for some reason I can't get it, okay? And that's the point of this provision. You know, oftentimes in a contract, you are looking for things to not only protect yourself and to help you prosecute your claims, but you're also looking to educate the customer, right? You want something to go back on and say, hey, Mr. Customer, do you remember when we signed this contract? Do you remember when I told you that it was going to be very hard to get materials? Well, guess what? Here we are, okay? That can kind of help get people off center, and that's kind of what I'm looking for here, okay? So think about adding that to either your existing contracts, if you can, when you're having negotiations for you know, revisions or an amendment. Definitely add it into existing contracts. Ones that you're bidding now, okay? Delay provisions. Okay, we do a lot of delay work. It can get convoluted. You know, for those of you that are involved with the larger infrastructure type projects, I see your virtual head shaking. You know what I'm talking about. So delay clauses can provide a basis for you to submit either a claim or a request for time extension, but you got to read them carefully. Now, most savvy commercial contracts have what's known as a no damages for delay provision. And what that says is that you will be entitled to receive additional time, but not money, no cost, okay? And there's a lot of ways around that. So for example, if your customer actively interfered with the project, so on and so forth, I wouldn't have a job if I couldn't figure out a way around that. But that's something that you need to look out for. So I would say 8 out of 10 times when it comes to increased lead times, really what the contractor wants is just an extension. Okay, yes, there are costs associated with it, but really they're looking for the extension. So there's a couple of things that I want to recommend to you. One is this is not the time to have your project manager or superintendent be lax on submitting requests for extension of time. So as I am speaking now, there's a pretty decent thunderstorm going on outside. Okay, every time it rains, every time it snows, every time that project is stopped, you need to submit a request for time extension. Do it. Okay, and the reason I'm saying that is you don't know how many days you're going to need to beat that liquidated damages claim, right? You don't know what kind of impact the materials are going to have on your project. So before, where you'd let stuff slide, if you missed a half day here or a day there, you need to document everything. You need to get every single day you can. Now, let me tell you something else that has worked well for me. Okay, and I'm giving you, this is another trick of the trade. We have got a lot of contractors right now that are facing significant delays as a result of material shortages or supply disruption, okay? When that happens, you know, I've got a well-known general contractor that just sent me a nasty gram saying, you know, delaying the project, we're going to be, you know, whatever LDs they get stuck with, they're going to assess those damages to us, so on and so forth. So in my response letter that I'm currently drafting in my head, what I want to do is I want to say, yes, you know, these materials were delayed. They were unforeseeable. This is unforeseeable. This was a force majeure, all the stuff that we talked about before. But what I also want to point out to the general contractor is, but for the fact that they stopped the job in January and February, we wouldn't be in this situation. We would have already completed our work. Their prior delay impacted the schedule and pushed us into this, you know, unforeseeable morass of supply disruption. Does that make sense? That's a clever argument, right? I'm going to pat myself on the back. What I'm doing there is I'm pointing to prior delay that happened in the contract to say, but for that, if I could have worked every day I was supposed to work, we wouldn't be having this conversation because I would have ordered it on this day. I would have had it on that day, pound sand. okay? Is that going to win the day? Well, it depends on your contract, right? Everything depends. And I'm trying not to give you a lawyer answer, but that's the reality. I can tell you what it does do is it gets the other side thinking, okay? It gets you in the game to where hopefully you can negotiate a resolution, okay? So keep that in mind. Let's talk a little bit about how to deal with liquidated damages. Okay, this is one of the biggest issues that I'm kind of having to face off now, not just from supply issues, but COVID-19 still. So the number of delay claims that we have has increased 32% year over year. Okay, that is a legitimate stat that we have here internally based on all the litigation and all the arbitration that we're currently involved in. I haven't seen the most current stat, but the last time I saw it, we were pushing 400. Okay, 400 cases all over the U.S. and Canada, and that gives you an idea that 32% increase, that's a significant increase, okay? So from a liquidated damages standpoint, the only thing that you need to know, and pay attention to this, okay? The only thing that you need to know is you've got to beat the days. If you beat the days, you beat the claim. If you beat the days, you beat the claim. What do I mean by that? Okay, liquidated damages, for those of you that don't know, it's a provision in a contract that says, here's your completion date. For every day that you miss over that, I, the customer, am entitled to X, $250 a day, $1,000 a day, whatever it might be, right? So if you are 53 days over your completion date, all you have to do is find 53 days to beat that claim in its entirety. One of the mistakes that contractors do is they look at the number, the total number of the damages, and try to negotiate that rather than knocking back the days, which will get that number down as a result, okay? So how do you do that? How do you get that time back? Well, you look for things like excusable delay. Okay, excusable delay is stuff that, let's say you got a time extension for, or something that you received contractually to allow for additional delay. Let's say there was a delay in the issuance of the notice to proceed that truncated your schedule, okay? Concurrent delay. Concurrent delay is where, yes, you were delayed 20 weeks because of material disruption, but during that 20 weeks, the owner didn't finish the roof deck, or didn't finish this thing that needed to be done in order for you to perform your work, okay? So as a result, there was a concurrent delay. Therefore, you can't be held solely liable for this claim, okay? Let's say there is delay that was caused by other that hurt you or prevented you from performing your work. So let's say the site contractor didn't get out there and finish clearing and grubbing the site to allow you to start, doing your structural steel or foam work or whatever it is that you need to do, okay? So what you are trying to do there, it's a game of days. That's all it is, okay? And I'll go say it again. Obtain extensions for every single thing that you're doing. The party with the best paper wins the day. Remember, if it's good for you, you put it in writing. If it's bad for you, pick up the phone, okay? Text messages or writing. Avoid text messages if you can, unless you want them to be exhibit number 2 in an arbitration or a court case. The arguments that I made before can also apply to help you assist with liquidated damages claims, right? So if it was impossible for you to perform, if the purpose of the contract was frustrated, then what you can do is argue those legal theories regardless of whether you have a force majeure provision. You could say it was impossible for me to perform because this global issue with supply chain disruption prevented me from getting these materials, okay? It's a decent argument. Okay, is it going to win the day? Don't know. But at the end of the day, it's about getting you in the game so you can hopefully negotiate out of it. Look for those types of things. Get creative. And then again, one of the things that I like to do is if you know you're facing liquidated damages, if you can't get materials, look to rework the schedule. Figure out how can you shave off as much of that time as possible before you get hit with it. It may be you may rephase the project internally and start a different sector of the work. You may look to acquire substitution materials or actually work with the general contractor or the customer to have you shifted towards the end of the project rather than at the beginning of the project. Now, clearly, if you're doing structural steel work or roofing work, it's very difficult to obtain that end of the work. but you never know, depending on what you're doing, okay? So what I want you to do there is I want you to get creative. Now, in the last 10 minutes, I know I've covered a tremendous amount. I've got some more I can talk about, but really what I wanted to do was turn it over to you guys and ask you, what questions are you dealing with? What are you dealing with in the industry that has affected you now that we've come out of COVID? We're not completely out of it. And one of the things I want to underscore here is that everybody's got positivity, right? We're all excited about seeing people. We're all excited about getting out again, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we're not completely out of this, right? So we still need to be cautious, and we still need to understand that there is potential risk out there. When it comes to dealing with employees, I always want to make sure that I am doing whatever I can from a safety standpoint. Even if I personally, don't want to wear a mask when I go to Walmart, if it's about safety or those types of things, I try to lean towards that. Okay. So you really want to err on the side of caution, especially as we have these other variants and things that are out there. So what questions can I answer for you guys? I know I talked about a lot, but I'm looking forward to answering whatever you have.
Any questions out there?
So let me throw one other thing out, Kayla. Well, if nobody's got any questions, what's interesting is as we start having return to work and we've got a variety of issues related to vaccines and other things, after we get through this material shortage issue, what I see and what a lot of people have started talking about is what is known as the turnover tsunami. Okay, and right now, the biggest threat to construction in general, aside from the material issue, is lack of skilled labor, right? You can't find anybody that actually knows what they're doing. So one of the things that concerns me, Kaylin, as I look at the future is the attrition rates, especially for home office personnel, have skyrocketed. I saw a recent stat that said, 59% of all workers, that are 40 and under are looking for another job. That is a huge stat. The unemployment stats, they recently said that it was the highest attrition rate that they had recorded in 20 years. It was at 2.7% of the populace. So why is that? And the only thing that I can tell you is I think a lot of it is that when people started moving to this remote work, when they started moving away from, co-worker interaction, there was less of that collegiality. People became more disillusioned about, what's important and what's not important. And I think that you're having a lot of people sort of reassess what they want out of life. So for the listeners, one of the things that you want to try to account for is figure out how to create policies, how to create cohesiveness to stave off this turnover tsunami. It's a real thing. Google it, okay? And, I know internally, we've definitely put more money into lunches and gatherings and training and camaraderie and those types of things to try to keep people engaged and happy. But my concern is, especially as we start, moving into third and fourth quarter, that even if we start figuring out how to navigate the material issue, that we're going to have even a bigger lack of skilled labor issue as a result of some of these turnovers and just super high demand for workers in almost every industry.
Right. And just so you're aware, we do have a question that came through. Mm-hmm. How do you pursue RFQs, which dictate unrealistic timetables for construction, some of which dictate LDs?
That's a great question, Thomas. Thanks for that question. And, one of the things, public bid work is incredibly difficult. So if you receive an RFQ, federal work at least gives you access through the FAR and capability to submit an REA and some other things. Even if there's a suspension of work, we've gotten real creative with federal projects. But if it's normal bid work and they're asking for an RFQ, what I like to do is I like to ask questions in advance. I like to pose the issue often through the Q&A process that you can do with the procurement officers of the procurement department to say, hey, what are you doing to navigate these issues? What if we are unable to get materials? Okay, how do we accommodate that? How do we deal with that? Okay, and if they respond tough, then at least you know where you stand. If they were say, hey, well, we're open to some leniency here. What I've tried to do is I've tried to think creatively about how to navigate those timetables, okay? With regard to pricing, it's fairly easy to just say, hey, are you open to direct purchase? Because that way you can shift the burden to them. With regard to timetables, what I've had to do is I've had to have frank conversations up front with whoever is in charge from an owner standpoint, whether it's an owner's rep, it's an outside consultant, it's an architect or an engineer, to say, hey, we got to figure out some way to navigate these issues. Okay. Oftentimes in RFQs, they are submitting the contract that you need to execute. Okay. So it's difficult for you to necessarily revise that contract. But to the extent that you can, you've always got to be looking at ways to extend either the duration or create some kind of caveat or leeway in there to help you do that. I understand your issue. It is an issue that we constantly navigate. The other issue that you may face, Thomas, as you look at these RFQs, is right now, a lot of these arguments are decent, right? You're probably going, oh, yeah, Trent's not too bad. He's got some decent arguments. Okay, here's the problem. The longer this thing goes on, is it really unforeseeable? Okay, I could argue yes, and I could make up a good argument there, but the longer it goes on, the more difficulty you're going to have claiming that this is force majeure to potentially get you out of unrealistic timetables. So my suggestion to you is, as my dad always told me, it's the contracts that you walk away from that make you a good contractor, okay? And I didn't know what he meant until I started my own business, and now I've got a better understanding of that. So be careful out there. It is what it is, but see if you can't ask those pertinent questions up front and have an open dialogue about what the current issues are.
Okay, do we have any last questions? Anything else from our attendees? Okay, I am not seeing any questions coming through. Did you have any last words, Trent?
I just want to thank everybody. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm not on the clock. I'm happy to answer any questions that you got. And definitely Tampa, when you guys are here at MetalCon, please stop by our booth. It gets lonely out there. Come say hi to me. Say hi to my team. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys, and I'll also be speaking as well. So always a pleasure. Love MetalCon. It's a great time. Look forward to seeing you guys there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Trent. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, we are taking that summer break. We will be joining you live again on July 28th of 2021 at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there. Thanks everyone again. Have a great rest of your days. Bye-bye.